Illinois Democrats go to Philadelphia and talk about the 2018 governor's race. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. The Democratic National Convention has been going on in recent days. The governor has been traveling the state. Here to talk about such things with me, Andy Maloney, State House Bureau Chief of the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, is back. Andy, thank you.
Good to be back.
Dave Dahl is here. He's State House reporter, WTAX Radio in Springfield.
Thank you.
Dave, welcome back also.
Thank you.
Well, all of us have been, like the rest of America, watching the convention from our homes. However, it's been pretty interesting that as Hillary Clinton was an Illinois native, has been named the nominee of the Democratic Party for president, the Illinois delegation meetings, which our colleagues in the reporting crew out in Philadelphia have been telling us, they've been doing some talking about the potential people to run against Governor Bruce Rauner, the first-term Republican, in 2018, which, of course, people say, you know, we should worry about this November's election, but people are clearly, you know, getting ready for that. Andy, I guess Dick Durbin is one of those.
Dick Durbin is certainly on the list. He's been on the list before of potential gubernatorial candidates. Obviously, he's one of the members of leadership in the U.S. Senate for the Democrats, but this week we found out that the Speaker of the House, Michael Madigan, had approached him about possibly running for governor in 2018, along with some others.
Or at least discussed it with him.
Discussed it.
Yeah.
And he's so far not backed down from that, not tried to put it to bed and say, I'm sticking in the Senate or anything. He's kind of said, well, we're focused on 2016, and we'll make a decision after that.
Yeah, Dave, there was also a poll this week. We Ask America, it's an independent subsidiary of the Illinois Manufacturers Association, but they do work some polls on both sides of the aisle. They do some Democratic stuff outside of Illinois, I know. They did just a potential take a look down the future poll, some names. Dick Durbin, you know, who would you want as a Democrat running for governor? Dick Durbin got like 49%. Pat Quinn, who has made rumblings of wanting to run again, has been active in the Chicago political scene again. The former governor got just under 10%. And then some other people, including Chris Kennedy of the Kennedy family and Kwame Arul, a state senator, got some lesser numbers, I think both under 5%. Dave, any of this mean anything at this point?
Well, on the one hand, no. On the other hand, no. The term's not even half over.
Right.
We don't know who's really running. And if you're going to have a poll like that, why not throw in Lisa Madigan?
Yeah, well,
she needs to be in.
What the pollster
she needs
said
to be
was
in there if Durbin's going to be in. Come on.
Well, what the pollster said was that Lisa Madigan, after talking about running for governor a couple years ago, said, I will not be governor as long as my father is Speaker of the House. I think everybody kind of thinks Mike Madigan, who has become kind of the nemesis of Governor Rauner, will probably not drop out of the race in 2018, and so would probably be there, which could keep her out of it. Although I guess she told reporters out in Philly that she's not closing the door entirely, or at least indicated that.
Right, and we know when any politician is being quizzed on their prospective races, they're even sometimes when it seems like they close the door, sometimes it's sort of the denial, or they might change their minds, which is something that's happened before. Look, I agree with Dave in that the poll is, it's sort of fun, it's entertaining a little bit.
It's fodder for television.
It's fodder for television, exactly.
Right.
But the important thing there, I think, is name recognition. People obviously know Dick Durbin. He's been in the Senate for a while. People remember Pat Quinn. Obviously, he got a lower percentage there, but he's already been governor. It's sort of the attitude maybe that he had his shot. And the other folks maybe just aren't sort of registering with people now.
Well, I want it solely for the commercials, if for no other reason. Durbin running against Rauner, Rauner running against Durbin. I mean, that would be epic.
It would be epic. You know, it's funny just to show my age, I guess, but Dick Durbin ran for lieutenant governor with Mike McAuliffe on the Democratic ticket in 1978 when Jim Thompson had only been in his first term, which was a 2-year term.
And he was not quite as big, Jim.
And he was very well. He was very popular. And with a 2-year term, it was very hard to beat him. And Durbin, I think he'd been the parliamentarian in the Senate. He'd worked for Paul Simon, the lieutenant governor, and so he's been involved in the state stuff before he got into Congress and the U.S. Senate. So that's interesting. Christopher Kennedy is an interesting guy. He's been U of I board. His family used to own the Merchandise Mart in Chicago.
Yeah.
He's out of that now, I believe, but I think he owns some kind of a urban grocery provision kind of business in Chicago. And he's been rumored to be interested in running for governor as well. Again, we're talking about 2018, but hey, this is Springfield, and people look at the governor and look at the Democrats and say a big fight is coming in the next 2.5 years, and actually right after this November, we're going to get heavily into this. So Chris Kennedy also had a speech to the Illinois delegation at that convention, and as Durbin had one just late in the week saying that the governor he's outraged, the governor is hurting people with his policies, people in Southern Illinois are hurting, and the governor shouldn't be dividing the state by going downstate and talking about a Chicago school bailout and things like that. Chris Kennedy said similar things. He brought many businesses to the Merchandise Mart. Nobody's talking about the turnaround agenda as those businesses came to Illinois, and he also differs with those pro-business / anti-union or union weakening things that the governor, Rauner, wants to do. What was interesting in this thing, though, just the dynamics, Chris Kennedy has talked in the past about running for office before, but has never really done it in Illinois. And then after his speech, the reporters, who again have traveled across the country to watch our delegation, and all the Chicago TV guys are there, who are almost as mean as Dave Dahl in a bunch, and they surrounded Chris Kennedy apparently, and he said, "I've said what I'm going to say. You should just listen to the speech." And he went into an elevator and he got into a little fight with one of the reporters, like, "Why are you following me in here?" And the reporter's like, "Why do you keep teasing people that you're running and not answer questions?" And so it was that kind of a thing. And then Kennedy talked later to Mark Brown of the Chicago Sun-Times, just saying, "I just, thought that what I said was appropriate. And I don't really believe in the media scrum," which was interesting because Mark Brown finished his column in the Sun-Times saying, maybe that's a good reason not to run.
Yeah.
We'll see where that
and
goes.
And there certainly will be a number of more media scrums if he does end up getting into that type of race.
Dave, you brought up Lisa Madigan. Would she be formidable if she wanted to do this? Mike Madigan's daughter, the Attorney General, who I think is on her fourth term. She'd be running for a fifth.
Fourth, running for a fifth if she runs again for Attorney General. Boy, to find formidable. I thought, 1 or 2 cycles ago, she would be really popular and close to unbeatable. But now that you've got Bruce Rauner and his money in the mix, you know what you're going to be facing. You know that whatever Democrat is on the ballot, we're going to be hearing all about Mike Madigan. If Lisa Madigan's on the ballot, we're going to be hearing all about Mike Madigan. And, at the risk of sounding like I'm speculating, well, I am speculating. The window for Lisa for governor, I think, is a little narrower than it used to be. I think it might be closing. She obviously loves being an attorney general in Illinois. She's positioned the attorney general as a consumer affairs office as opposed to a corruption buster.
And that's mostly what the statute calls for.
You're exactly right.
It's not usually a criminal thing. That's state's attorneys do most of the criminal stuff.
She's not LNS, but if there's a crib mattress recall, she's going to be out front on it. And I don't say that to be mean, but with regard to Lisa Madigan, she loves what she does. Maybe there will be an Illinois Supreme Court justice opening in her future, or some other thing. She clearly, to me, doesn't have this white-hot desire to be governor of Illinois, because I think if she did, she would have run by now.
Well, if we find out you're wrong, she'll watch the show and she'll call you.
It's going to be on tape, just like the tape of reporters chasing Chris Kennedy into an elevator.
Also true. Very interesting. As all this is going on, most of these programs we've done, we've talked about the state budget. There is still a giant gap between what the state is spending and what the state is bringing in, billions of dollars, but there is a stopgap budget in place, so many agencies and institutions like universities are getting some money, are continuing to operate, even though there is still pain out there from the as yet unresolved budget. It's at least carrying it through the November election. So what does the governor of Illinois do after that is done? He's been to, I think it's at least 8 places in the last few days, pushing something that he pushed back when he was running for governor in 2014, which kind of helped get extra people onto his bandwagon, which is term limits. And he's also pushing remap reform after a judge said that the almost 600,000 signatures gathered to get remap reform, new way of drawing districts on the next ballot, was unconstitutional. That still has to be heard by the Supreme Court. So just the governor doing this, how interesting. He's kind of like he's trying to make this kind of presidential in that every day he has to have a theme and he goes and does something, even though this is kind of a rehash, isn't it?
This is obviously something that he's promoted before. You said 2 years ago he was kind of touting this stuff for the first time. He's trying to get a little, I think, extra mojo out of it, if you will. This is still a popular idea when you give it to voters, and it resonates in a way that perhaps on the flip side, Madigan's millionaire tax, which is directed at Governor Rauner, for Governor Rauner, the term limits is directed pretty squarely at Speaker Michael Madigan in a way. So this is something that I think he's trying to capitalize on, is that popularity again, and sort of remind people that this is his issue, this is the thing that he's going to stand on, at least throughout the remainder of his term. And he knows that it's not going to get through the legislature. I mean, this has...
Well, and he's telling people, are you with like Mike Madigan and the leaders, or are you with, and the people, or are you with, or the bosses? And he does this in all these different places. So it just kind of continues to stoke the political fire. Dave, did you get down to Auburn when he was there?
I was in Auburn, with Gary Niemeyer. He has said that the fall veto session, which is after the election, has to be the time to get it through. Absolutely. He thinks that the time is right. You're right. He wants to stick Mike Madigan with something, and he wants to do it, make a Thanksgiving turkey out of it.
Of course, if Mike Madigan is like the target, and let's say they get term limits on the ballot, and then it goes into effect, and what it really means is there'll be an 8 or a 10-year limit on your term, and then that means nothing can work retroactively in law. So that means if Speaker Madigan, who, gosh, how old is he? So, I mean, really, it looks like the governor just wants to have a kind of a political club to bash people with. I mean, the people who don't believe in term limits say there's a pretty good turnover in the legislature anyway.
I want to say that I saw somewhere that Dan Brady is kind of off the reservation on this. And do you really want a legislature filled with people who haven't been there very long?
Yeah, and I know Jim Edgar doesn't believe in term limits either, although he hasn't necessarily agreed with a lot that Bruce Rauner's there. But I recently talked to him. He said, there's turnover. Maybe a governor, you could see it because of the power in that office, but legislators tend to turn over.
Edgar himself didn't serve very long.
Yeah, and all the leaders, including the Republican leaders in the legislature, are the experienced ones who have been there more than a dozen years or 20 years.
And of course, a counter argument to the idea of getting legislators out is, well, then the power shifts to the executive, if the executive branch is not term limited, as well as sort of the paid staff.
And staff, and then there's lobbyists too, because lobbyists are not term limited because the company will pay, and if they have 30 years of experience, they kind of know how to work the system.
I think
maybe it's good to have people who know how not to be worked.
Well, it's interesting that since I've been here, I've noticed that the coverage of the lawmakers, the rank and file lawmakers by the Chicago media has been not as intense as maybe the downstate media, and part of that might be your Chicago lawmakers are waiting their turn to be aldermen. They think that is the step up, and
in Chicago, being a congressman is a step down from being an alderman, or at least it has been said.
So I think you're onto something with regard to certainly the House, and to a lesser extent the Senate being a stepping stone or something. And as Speaker Madigan said, well, number one, Speaker Madigan said, I believe in term limits as administered by the electorate. And secondly, I'm not 100% sold that Madigan as boogeyman, because and you might have seen online a new ad against Gary Forby, who's
Southern
Illinois Senator, and
Democrat.
If I live in Gary Forby's district, maybe I like Gary Forby. maybe I like my lawmaker, because all those guys are bad, except for my lawmaker.
Yeah.
I like you tell all those bad guys there, Representative Maloney, that I want them out, but you keep doing your job because I like my guy.
does
So I
happen.
think hanging my long-term incumbent guy on Mike Madigan, whose name I never see on a ballot, doesn't necessarily resonate.
Yeah, well, it was tried in a district including Springfield with 50th Senate District, Sam McCann, a Republican-aligned PAC that the governor gave, worked millions of dollars into through the side and sometimes directly, tried to make Sam McCann Mike Madigan's favorite senator, even though Sam's a Republican, because he voted on some pro-union issues,
Yeah,
and he won a very expensive primary,
The,
and now he's unopposed in the general.
The rank and file, and that's another thing that I want to get to a little bit, but the governor says that the rank and file need to stand up to the leaders, particularly Democrats. They need to stand up to Madigan. But when McCann takes the vote that he took, it's all nuclear against
Right,
McCann.
because he stood up to the governor, his own
But
leader. Right.
You take a look at the term limits and redistricting, just for example, Tim Butler from the north side of Springfield, and his district goes up north a little bit.
Maybe towards Lincoln, right?
Yeah, past Lincoln to Pekin, Tazewell County. He was appointed to succeed Rich Brower, and so he hasn't even been elected, yet he's unopposed.
Right.
What are we talking about here where you can't even have a contested race against somebody who was appointed within the past 2 years?
Well, and it's interesting. That's a very Republican district. The governor's argument for remap that I keep hearing is, 60% of the races or 65 are unopposed, but that's kind of always been. Reform would change that in some way, but there are very strong Republican districts and very strong Democratic districts.
And
we'll
congressionally,
see.
I know the Republicans have to be packed in somewhere, but one of the biggest advocates of remap reform is Darren LaHood. And when he says that, I point out, who's the biggest beneficiary of the map now? You, Congressman.
And there he is. Anyway, speaking of turnover in the legislature, a very prominent member of the legislature who watchers of the legislature know, even though he's from Downers Grove and a former Downers Grove mayor, Ron Sandak, he's a Republican, often took the lead as the lead floor debater for the House Republicans, just up and resigned about a week ago. And now a replacement is being named. The governor said he didn't hear about it till all of us did. And Representative Sandak put out the message that some social media sites of his had been hacked, and he decided basically to spend more time with his family. Do we know more than that? Yeah, it's kind of a volcanic thing, just because he played such a prominent role in House debate.
He's Rauner's guy.
Yeah,
right. It was surprising, especially given he wasn't in the legislature for a super long time, but in that short time he was able to kind of ascend and be this floor leader, this specific role on the House floor where he's kind of the one that's articulating the Republican
debater.
Marching orders. Yeah. Right, exactly.
Well, I actually go ahead.
And he just seemed, at least from the outside, to really relish that role, and he was used to kind of taking arguments and people, sort of, he'd run some contested races in part because of that. So, it was surprising to see, and he kind of went quietly.
Quickly.
Yeah. Right.
Over the weekend.
Yeah, well, not long ago, at a press conference at the governor's office, and I asked the governor, you keep talking about Jim Edgar as part of the problem too, because Edgar has been critical of the governor, and what is it exactly you don't like about him? And I know they were talking about like the pension ramp, the plan that Edgar put in place and how much we have to pay now for pensions, but some people skip it. Anyway, details like that. But Ron Sandak was at that press conference and stood in front and didn't let the governor answer. Said, "I'll take that, governor," and just kind of cut in front of him and took the heat off the governor, which was perfect for the kind of role we're talking about. He was also, I think, at least on some stuff, socially moderate. If I'm correct, he voted for
supported same-sex marriage, right?
Right, which caused him trouble in his Republican district. On the other hand, he was able to overcome that and win re-election. On we go. A little bit of federal that we should talk about as long as the conventions have been going on, but one of the people who by now should have spoken at the Democratic convention is Tammy Duckworth, congressperson from Illinois, who is the from Hoffman Estates up northern Illinois, and she's taking on Mark Kirk, the incumbent Republican senator. And Andy, there's been a little movement there was a lawsuit that a couple of people for the Department of Veterans Affairs in the state, which she used to run, had a lawsuit saying that they were whistleblowers, but that Tammy Duckworth didn't handle things well. That there was a settlement announced, and then there was, where are we?
Yeah, so it seems like the plaintiffs, the women that filed the lawsuit, took issue with the way that the Duckworth campaign sort of characterized their claims in their lawsuit.
Right, like it was always a frivolous lawsuit.
Right, it was reported.
It had been dismissed a couple other places.
Right, and they said it was a frivolous lawsuit that should have ended years ago. And at least based on that information that was reported, it seems like they said, well, we don't like that characterization. Let's go to trial.
Right. We're going to reject it.
We're going to reject the settlement agreement.
Right.
And so that was the stage that it was at, as they had apparently there'd been sort of a meeting of the minds, and they had drawn up this agreement. Now they claim that they didn't sign it, and they can go back and kind of dispute whether it's finalized.
And the Daily Herald announced that they weren't going to take it, but then it was further reported, I think, by the Tribune or whoever was covering this, that the Attorney General's office said, well, they've made the deal and the deal sticks, so it won't go to trial. So as we're not exactly sure what it is, but I will say Mark Kirk's people certainly love this and put out this giant press release. Look at Tammy Duckworth, she's in trouble again, because this is one of the most hotly contested races for United States Senate in the country. It's a presidential year. There's Donald Trump on the Republican side, and Illinois is pretty much of a Democratic state. So we'll see where that one goes.
Yeah, I wonder if the Kirk people got to one or two of those people.
There was some indication in one story I saw that there was some to find out something. So again, as we talk here, we're remaining to be seen if it goes back to trial or if it just gets settled, and if there's anything untoward that happened in any way. But the whole thing just shows that's a pretty tough race.
And that's a key issue for both of them, obviously, veterans issues or something stemming from veterans
yes,
issues.
She, of
both
course,
being
was, has, lost her legs when her helicopter was shot down in Iraq, correct?
Correct.
And Mark Kirk, of course, is a veteran Navy person also, and had a stroke, and so, but talks a lot about disabled veterans and what people need to do. So, also late in the week, the governor announced in Chicago that they're looking for a new manager for the Illinois lottery. We're paying our lottery winners now, I think, with the past budget and the stopgap. What's going on with all of this?
Well, the management company that the Quinn administration signed up with, North Star, to take over the management of the lottery, it was screwed up 8 ways to Sunday, and got as the changeover was happening at the governor's mansion. They're in the process of firing North Star, and the governor announced on Thursday in Chicago that they're putting out an RFP, request for proposal. And what I thought was interesting is you don't have to be a lottery company, you don't have to be a gaming company, you could be a tech company or a marketing company. Let's see your proposal. Let's see what you're going to bring to the table, so to speak.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. I just glanced at the press release, but it sounded like other states are selling more lottery tickets online, as if we should do that. It's really kind of interesting, because I remember the days when gambling was illegal in Illinois, and then, well, I guess under Dan Walker it was scratch-off lottery tickets, and now you go to there's one kind of mile-long place around Springfield in one of its little suburbs that has 12 gambling dens that you can now go into and play video games, plus the boats, plus horse racing that we've had forever.
The governor said that online and mobile gaming are really a thing, and we really need to be there. He said Michigan, 6% of lottery sales is online and mobile. Illinois is not even 1%, and he said the United Kingdom's 30%.
Okay. There's also, if I can find it, speaking of the governor likes to talk up business in Illinois, and I think he used his executive authority to make a new public-private, or a private thing that helps the State Department of Commerce, the Illinois Business and Economic Development Corp., instead of just to help the Department of Commerce. And Jim Schultz, who used to be the head of DCEO, is now the head of that. Well, they changed the name to Intersect Illinois, just because they want to make it better. So does this help?
Shazam!
Rebranding, right? That's the whole...
it sounds a little too much like Insect Illinois, but it's Intersect.
Right. And yeah, it sort of reminds me of the campaign, the Illinois turnaround. It's kind of that same sort of theme. You get a new name on something, and maybe
Yeah,
can help
I did
shape
notice
the image.
There was another story that Amazon has been going kind of crazy in Will County and Joliet and now in Romeoville. They've added they've announced within the last 2 years like 3. I guess they call them fulfillment centers, and one of them is like 1,500 jobs, and one is like 2,000, and the new one is 600. And basically, at least the first 2, the governor's office didn't even announce them because I asked the governor about that once. He said, "Well, we're still such a bad state. You know, they don't even announce good news because it doesn't fit the turnaround agenda advocacy."
Yeah, they're waiting for all the reforms to kick in, and they hide their light under a bushel. And I've said that before, and I've got a problem. You know, they make Skittles in Illinois now, and there was one company, I forget which one, was Whole Foods. Didn't they move from northwest Indiana to northeast Illinois? Now, I know that's maybe a little anecdotal, but those are stories that, I mean, Pat Quinn would put out a news release over less than that.
Well, that's clear. Yeah. I think that you can go both ways, and I think, but most governors in all of our experience have clearly done this like forever. So we'll see where it goes. There is an Illinois connection to John Hinckley Jr., who was the person who has now been released from the mental health facility and shot President Reagan in 1981. Tim McCarthy is the police chief in Orland Park. He was a Secret Service agent. He was shot in the chest taking a bullet for Reagan. He actually ran as a Democrat in the primary that Jesse White won, his first one to become Secretary of State. But, you know, I saw a story, Tim McCarthy was interviewed about this, and nobody told him John Hinckley was being released, and he didn't have a big opinion on it. But it's just, you know, it's been a long time since that happened. And, but you said, Andy, it deals with mental health situation.
The Hinckley case, it seems, was one of the landmark ones that spurred I think something like 38 states in the federal government to basically raise the threshold for what it takes to prove an insanity defense. And so that was sort of the impetus of why that's so much harder to prove these days.
Interesting. On that note, Andy Maloney, Dave Dahl, thanks for your insights. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.